Good evening. I am Councilwoman Ty Atkins, Vice President of the Gary Common Council, representative of the 4th District, and also the Chair of the Ways and Means Committee. Thank you for joining us this evening on Tuesday, June 8th. The committee meeting today is going to be, God willing, we only have one item. Joining me are my following colleagues, my council members at large, Councilmember Ron Moore, also Councilmember at large, Councilman Michael Brown, my council members that represent the Good evening. I am Councilwoman Ty Atkins, Vice President of the Gary Common Council, representative of the 4th District, and also the Chair of the Ways and Means Committee. Thank you for joining us this evening on Tuesday, June of the Council. Also with us this evening, we have our council attorney, Attorney Brenzer Williams, and of course from the administration, we have Attorney Arlene Coben. So the agenda item that we have is CPO 2021-39, which is an ordinance for the City of Gary, Lake County, Indiana, authorizing additional appropriations for the general fire aid. The meeting today is by our Mayor, Jerome Prince, City of Gary, and also Mr. Malik Harper, our City Controller. And I apologize, I do want to recognize Mr. Harper also being on this meeting with us this evening. Ms. Arlene, are you going to give the overview?
Yes, I am, since this took place before Mr. Harper's employment with the city.
Okay.
So CPO 2021-39 is an ordinance that appropriates reimbursement dollars that we received under the CARES Act from the state of Indiana. Last year, when the state of Indiana appropriated a little over $2 million to various cities in the state, the cities were able to use those dollars to purchase PPE and eventually to cover payroll expenses. When we received our reimbursement, it was set aside for use for public safety. The FOP later came to us and proposed an amendment to their pension distribution that we actually had approved at a prior board meeting. I think it was in the early part of May, that dealt with increasing the police pension and the fire pension. What the city administration is proposing to do is, with a bulk of the money, to appropriate it to cover the increased cost of the pension that we agreed to actually approve at that meeting. The balance of the funds will be returned to the departments that actually spent dollars. We'll be appropriating $9,065 to the city council, which actually spent that money last year for PPE. We'll be appropriating $21,856 to city court and $16,021 to the clerk. In my original ordinance, I had the clerk and the court's amount switched. So I proposed an amendment, and then I still didn't get it out of the body of the ordinance. I changed it on the budget sheets, but not the body of the ordinance. But in any case, these dollars will be appropriated back to the various departments. And in the case of the $2 million plus that will cover the cost, that will be attributed to the pension costs, we will be appropriating those dollars into our consolidated operations account, which is 602, and then it will be transferred to the pension funds. So this is kind of a two-part ordinance. It provides both an additional appropriation of dollars that we received back from the state of Indiana as reimbursement, and then it actually reappropriates the dollars, and then in the case of the pension fund, transfers it to the proper fund for use.
Thank you, Attorney Colvin. So just to start discussion, I just have a couple of questions just again to make sure I understand. So you're right, it was the CPO 2021-34 was on our agenda for May the 4th, but we approved it. The 5/18 meeting, and that was the one about the pension. Could you just explain the difference between like that ordinance and then what we're doing here?
The first ordinance, the one that you heard back in May, increased the master patrolman level and master firefighter level, or the first entry levels, to set the pension amount.
Okay.
Once that pension amount was set at that level, then that meant that the contributions that the city has to pay now have increased. In order for us to be able to pay those increases, we're using our reimbursement from the CARES Act to cover the cost.
So we had
Once
to
we do
reflect
this one time,
Okay.
then this is a situation where we get pension relief. The state is going to give us back the money on a
Right.
yearly basis once we have this
Right.
initial contribution.
So that's why we attached the salary schedule to that ordinance, because it reflected the increase at the individual position levels, for lack of a better
Yes.
phrase. Got
Yes.
it. And so we had to set what that level will be at. And then we knew we had the funds for the one time to hit. And then based off of the terms related to our pension, did we know that it will be, I don't want to say replenished, but reimbursed
Yes.
from an
Reimbursed.
ongoing. I got you. Okay.
Yes.
And then the other question that I had, is there a reason why we had to appropriate funds to consolidated operations, then to two different pensions versus directly to the
Yes.
pension funds?
According to the State Board of Account, they provided guidance to us dated September 30th, 2020. And it says that the amounts that you get reimbursed from the CARES Act have to go back to the general fund. So the consolidated operations is the fund that we use, because it's an account or a fund that all the departments use, for various reasons. We put it in consolidated operations and then transferred it to the pension fund.
Yes, and I had that from my notes from the budget season, Attorney Colvin. You explained consolidated operations. Thank you. Council members, do you all have any questions related to the ordinance? Any questions related to the appropriations? We're good? For the record, I want to acknowledge 6th District Councilman Dwight Williams.
I apologize for being late. I just pulled over because it's raining.
No problem. Be careful. So I think we are good to go.
And I'll just say this one last point. Once this is approved by the council, then we have to send it to DLGF so they can approve it as well.
Which is the Division of Local
Government Finance.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
Short and sweet, council members. I appreciate it. All right, see you at the next one, Planning and Development at 5:30. Thank you.
Okay.
Meeting adjourned.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Planning and Development Committee, June the 8th at 5:30 p.m. We have one ordinance on our agenda for today, that's CPO 2021-40, an ordinance amending Title 15, entitled Land Usage, Chapter 123, entitled Zoning Code of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Gary, Indiana. Petitioner Ben Kramer, 3401 Gary LLC, 4900 Northcott Avenue, Downers Grove, Illinois, 60515, property 1400 Colorado Street, Gary, Indiana. Tonight we have several of my colleagues that's on: Dwight Williams of the 6th District, Councilwoman Linda Barnes Caldwell of the 5th District, Councilwoman Mary Brown of the 3rd District, Councilman Cody Witherspoon of the 2nd District. We have our attorney, Council Attorney Renzo Williams also, and Mr. Jenkins is on from the City Planning Department, and my Councilwoman and Vice President, Councilwoman Ty Atkins of the 4th District is on. Did we miss anyone? Okay, and I see our petitioners on, Mr. Kramer. At this time, we will get started. I will ask Mr. Jenkins if you can give us the overview. And Mr. City Attorney, Steve Jenkins is on also.
Okay. Just to be clear, Councilman, Greg Jenkins, the Director of Planning, will be giving the overview for this particular ordinance. He was there during the Planning Commission when it was approved.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Mr. Greg Jenkins. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good.
The this is CPO 2021-40, known as PC 2021-002, and as you said, is generally described as 1400 Wyoming and 1400 Colorado. The owner of the property is the School City of Gary, and the applicant is Ben Kramer, 3401 Gary LLC. The property consists of approximately 30 plus or minus acres, and its current condition is vacant, dune and swale, black oak savanna, and wetland. The north and the east perimeter of the property borders residential Etna. The south and west border borders the industrial and logistics area on 15th Avenue, just east of Interstate 65. The 2019 comprehensive plan calls for this particular property to remain green space. We reviewed the property and found that truck traffic on this proposal was limited to 15th Avenue, and 15th Avenue is a designated trucking route. The north and the west side, which borders industrial and logistics area, shows no adverse effect. On the north and the east sides of this property, which borders Etna, the site plan shows a 100-foot buffer strip, which mitigates almost all negative effects touching the residential areas. All the notifications of this property, including certified mailings, public notices, posting on the site, were timely, and records of these are all done on file. 3 letters of the certified letters that were sent out were returned. One was positive, one was opposed, and one had general questions. The Plan Commission voted on this and voted in favor of the petitioner and to send it on to council.
So, Mr. Jenkins, one thing I did hear you say is when you talked about the effects, you said pretty much not 100% of positive effect. So what effects would it have on the neighbors? Just paraphrase that a minute ago.
The only negative effect on the neighbors on the north side in particular might be some noise, but there would be almost no visibility between the neighbors and the truck parking lot and industrial facilities.
So can you tell us exactly the operations of what the petitioner plans on doing?
Okay, I need to return that to the commissioner or to the petitioner.
Okay. Mr. Kramer, at this time, can you give us an overview of what you plan on doing at this facility?
Sure. Thank you for having me here tonight. Thank you for that introduction, Greg. So I recognize some names, so I don't know if everyone was on the previous call or if I'm kind of redoing the whole thing. You let me know, but I will basically explain, what we're looking to do. If you can picture the site at 15th and I-65, and Greg, I don't know if we have a site plan to put up here, or who was kind of controlling that, but may help. 15th Avenue is a truck corridor already. There's industrial on the south side of 15th Avenue. This site is directly on the north side of 15th Avenue, and all traffic entering or exiting this site would be off of 15th Avenue. So there were some residents that had a concern about, increased traffic on 14th, which is the street running through Etna subdivision. There would be no traffic running through 14th because there wouldn't even be a driveway there. I mean, there'd be no way for any vehicles to access that. And then some of the residents were wondering if this was the school that is the old Etna Elementary School, and it's not that. So they just had, the wrong site in mind. And then when we explained what site it was, they had no issue. So as you can see from this aerial, there's a lot of industrial at that intersection. It's a prime intersection for logistics. It has effectively 4 interstates exiting all onto 15th Avenue. If you count 80 and 94, this is the first exit to the north. So you have 80, 94, 65, and 90, all with full interchanges effectively at 15th Avenue. And the properties that are to the south on 15th Avenue, just west of 65, basically I'm just looking to build similar buildings to those. I own the building that is the furthest, or it's the furthest, I guess, closest to the expressway entrance. Similar, that building's about 3 years old, and we could basically build more of those. All the traffic, again, is on 15th Avenue. It's the first site off of 65. If you discount NIPSCO's large complex there that is in between this site and I-65. And I'm proposing to maintain a treed buffer between any development on this site and any residents in the Etna neighborhood to the north. So their visibility, as Greg mentioned, would be really unaffected, and so would their traffic. So
basically just truck parking, is that what I'm gathering, what you're going to be doing here?
Several industrial buildings, would be ideal. I've been in the logistics space for 21 years as a broker. Yeah, that's a good site plan. A large percentage of this site is wetlands, and it basically cannot be developed. So, out of the 30 acres, we're hoping to get 5 to 8 developable, put in a couple industrial buildings. I'm aware of the demand for this particular corridor. For 15 years, I was the broker on the Ameriplex at the Port projects in Portage. Almost every industrial building in that park. If you can picture the Bass Pro Shop, there's retail and restaurants west of Bass Pro Shop, and all the industrial is north and east of Bass Pro Shop. I put every single tenant in that park over the first 15 years of its development. I handled similar parks in Bolingbrook, similar parks in Joliet, similar parks in Mokina, lots of projects, other projects in Northwest Indiana. And when I left the world of brokerage just last year to focus full-time on development, this site has the most potential, in my opinion, of any site in Northwest Indiana, given its expressway access and just availability. Part of the issue with developing in Northwest Indiana in general is there aren't decent sites available with good expressway access. You know, companies today do not want to be deep in the heart of municipalities far from the expressway where, you know, they maybe used to want to be in the past because they were a lot of, public transportation driven, et cetera. For the most part, people drive to work today. There's basically no public transit serving this facility. That may change. There is public transportation servicing Amazon just on the east side. I'm sorry, on the west side of 65. Maybe if we had a high employment company here, they would extend that east. But for the most part, this would be either a drive-to facility or Aetna residents would be able to walk there. That's what makes this a good site. It's available and it's right off the expressway.
At this time, I open up to my colleagues for any councilman that may have questions at this time.
Mr. Chair.
Councilwoman Atkins.
Thank you. I actually have a comment and then I have a couple of questions. And so my comment is for the administration. And so Mr. Jenkins, you probably can take this back. This particular packet that was presented to the council was very incomplete. So there was no information related to the letters that was sent to residents within the area. There was no information related to the site maps. There was no additional details in terms of what the recommendation was from the Planning Commission included in the packet. And so moving forward, I think that we've been through enough of these where we understand that the more information that you provide to the council in preparation for these meetings, we'll be more prepared to have specific questions related to what the petitioner is asking. So if we could put that into motion moving forward, that would be great. And I believe last planning and development meeting, we were missing information as well. And so I would like the administration to take that back. Now my questions, as it relates to the petition, and I think in the overview that was given, you did state that the Gary Community School Corporation is the current site owner. And so when are you looking to close on that property?
My contract states I can close as soon as I have the entitlements in place, which would be the zoning and maybe a building, a permit to at least clear the site. I may plan to build a building here on a speculative basis. It could potentially be the first spec building built in Gary in 30 plus years. But generally for these types of developments, if the site is cleared and prepped and marketed appropriately, then, companies will say, yes, I want to locate there. And this is the type of building I need. And then we go through the whole plan development process with that specific user in mind. So this is a general zoning so we can begin to market that site. Then there would still be going through the whole development process of the site. And I can close basically any time between obtaining the zoning and getting that approval.
Mr. Chair, is that our process? Do you know for us to do an approval if the petition does not currently have ownership and there's nothing, do you need a copy of the contract or does that not matter?
I believe we typically have done this before. Sometimes it is contingent on them getting ownership of the property if they can get the clearance through the city council. But normally we would have something in writing states that.
Okay.
And on that note, I can send you the contract. Mr. Jenkins does have it. And so.
All right. So thank you, Mr. Kramer. Yeah, none of that information was included in our packet. My other question is, you made reference to similar buildings that are in the vicinity or that are similar to what you're trying to do. So I'm just trying to put context clues together. It seems as though you possibly do not have current tenants, but your plan is to establish some type of logistic hub. Is that correct at that point? I'm confused as to my counterpart asked a question in terms of exactly what are you trying to do, and it seems as though I can't articulate what you're trying to do.
Sure. Within the zoning of M2, there's a wide variety of uses. The companies that would be immediately attracted to this area are logistics companies, distribution companies, contractors servicing, either the mills or general population in Northwest Indiana, et cetera. Anybody utilizing an industrial building. And those range from buildings with drive-in doors where you're servicing vehicles to buildings with loading docks where you're unloading product and maybe doing some light assembly. So those would be the types of users. The tenant, I already have 4 buildings at this intersection of 65 and 15th Avenue. And one is a small truck terminal, which was Stericycle, if you're familiar with their trucks going.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Stericycle.
Yeah, so their truck terminal has 16 dock doors on Texas Avenue, 1451 Texas. That's one of my tenants. That's my building. Directly south of this site, on the south side of 15th Avenue at 3401 East 15th Avenue, is the largest trucking company, the largest tanker trucking company in America, called Quality Carriers. They're my tenant on the south side. And on the east side, I have one of the Amazon Blue Van Yards, as well as a tenant known as Cavcaz Express. They're in the old Falcon trucking terminal. So those would be similar tenants. The demand for those types of uses at this intersection is very high. I'm working with an electric company that services the port. They're looking for a facility of about 10,000 square feet. So they would be one of the first ones that we would design a building for. So if you can picture a building, 10,000 square feet filled with expensive electrical equipment, and then they have a few service vehicles, and every morning they're always on standby for port and mill operations. So that would be another example. Is that helpful?
Yeah, so that answers the question. I'm going to repeat it to make sure. So you currently have 4 buildings that are similar. You have tenants in all of those buildings that are local within the vicinity of this particular location. You're currently looking to acquire this particular land, which sits at 1400 Colorado as well as Wyoming. And the business model at this point is if you build it, they will come. And so you're trying to do a logistics similar building apparatus, but you know that the market is there based on the current environment that you are with the industrial building that you currently have within the vicinity. Is that correct?
That's exactly right.
Okay. So thank you for that. The last question I had was specific to, I believe you spoke about a buffer. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Mr. Jenkins spoke about 100-foot buffer between the residential and the start of the development, whenever that is. So Mr. Jenkins, is that something that we have in the planning document restriction, or is that something that Mr. Kramer is just saying that he will do in an efforts to have good faith between the residents within that area and the start of that property?
This is shown on the site plan, which is currently being shared.
I'm sorry, Mr. Jenkins, I can't. Can you start over? The connection was a little bit bad on my end.
Sure. Let me know if you can't hear me again.
I got you now. It's clear.
That's better. Okay. On the site plan that I'm sharing off of this screen is a 100-foot residential buffer. And that if this should be included as a contingency in approval, then it should be listed as shown. Okay? This was shown entirely on a voluntary basis. We didn't ask for it. It came with the application.
Okay.
So it would be simple enough to include as a restriction.
Okay. All right. So contingency for that. All right.
So my thought there, just to expand on that, is that if a buffer helped all parties, see this as a more friendly development, both the residents to the north and the city, to make that easier, that's why I put that in there. But also, frankly, a good buffer there is as good for me as it is for them. Because, our building on the south side of 15th Avenue has had some security issues. And this would help, eliminate some of that. So we'd also have to, put in a fence, but leaving trees there and a natural buffer always helps.
Thank you, Mr. Kramer.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Councilwoman Brown, you're muted and you can go.
I'm sorry. I wanted to ask something and I could.
You're on. No.
Okay. Yeah, I just had one question or comment. You mentioned that this development would be similar to the one that's in Portage, like over by Nurpsey. Is that where you mean, over in that area? No.
I'm using that as a reference because I handled that park for 15 years.
Okay.
So the types of buildings would be a little bit different because that is, those are generally, all those buildings are multi-tenant. My general business plan and what users tend to prefer is more single tenant buildings, because given a choice, every company would rather have their own good looking freestanding building with their own parking lot than be a middle unit with tenants on both sides of them in the industrial world. So what I'm proposing is generally more single tenant buildings. That's how I would market this site. If we end up doing a 2-tenant building or something, it leaves it open for that. But a very similar building, if this is approved, I would even consider building a building on a speculative basis before there's an actual tenant. And that would look like the building that I own directly on the south side at 3401, because that building, I know I could have leased 4 times over during the time I had it vacant. So that's where the strong demand is. I don't know if there's a way for me to put up a picture, but I'd have to find one. But anyway, it's a good looking building. It's 3 years old. It's got a pitched roof. It has 7 drive-in doors, has about 3,500 square feet of office. And, it attracted a national quality tenant, which is my goal.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other council members have questions? Well, I just want to touch on a couple of things. I'm happy to hear about the buffer that's going in, and definitely figure you probably need a fence also. So are we just talking about a regular berm buffer, or are we going to buffer it with trees?
Well, it already is trees, so it really comes down to just not removing them.
Okay. So you just cut back to what you need and that's it.
Exactly. And then put a fence around whatever gets developed just to keep, add an additional layer.
So no type of landscaping or anything to improve that site or the area around from the residents?
Well, this site plan doesn't show it, but most of it is a big pond already. So it's already, this shows a little bit of wetlands, but if you physically walk around this site, there are two very large ponds. One is right next to the old baseball diamond, which is now overgrown, and one is on the north side, basically up against 14th Avenue. So it's incorporating those ponds into the development. Ponds make the best buffer physically, and so those would stay. There would be, as part of any of your Gary Planning Commission approval, there is some landscaping required around each particular building and maybe along 15th Avenue. So that would be part of it. And then again, a large part of this site is wetlands, which really can't be developed at all anyway. So a majority of this site, in fact, won't be touched at all.
If one attorney can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe a new law has come down by the state where you can now develop on wetlands now. I believe that's the last thing I heard about from Indianapolis, that they did make some changes to the law with developing on wetland. I didn't know if the petition was aware of that, but I believe
I am aware of that. I think it's 389. I haven't gone as far as seeing how that would affect this development, because it didn't change our site plan at all. But if it adds another building or two, then great. That just helps additional tax revenue.
okay. So I did want to just mention that. I don't know if we have anyone from the public on. I know there was some outreach to the first district council person, and I received a couple of calls on this development. And I didn't know if anyone from the public was on that may have questions. Okay. Right. If there's nothing else from any other council members. All right, that will end. We only have one that's on our agenda for today. We will take this consideration for third and final at the next council meeting. I believe that is on the 15th of June at 6 p.m. Asking the petitioner please to be there. If there's any additional concerns by any colleagues that may not be here or colleagues that are here, if you can be at that meeting, and we will decide on what we will do at the next meeting.
Okay.
All right. Okay, that will end our meeting. Everyone have a good night. God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Audio Jungle.